before Vern comes. Let's do the call to order.
One second, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Okay, did you guys all hear that?
Yep,
Yeah. Yes.
that's new, huh?
I guess they must have updated or done something because this thing has got a mind of its own now.
Yeah, it talks too.
So does my computer. Jeez. Well, I will announce that it is 6:02, and I'm going to call to order the meeting of the June 1st meeting of the South Kingstown Conservation Commission 2021. Let's start with roll call. Mary Talbot Rabiano.
Here.
Lorraine Joubert.
Here.
Matt Bradywood.
Here.
Christopher O'Connor.
Here.
Great. And Heffron is not going to be here this evening, and we are still waiting to hear from Vern Wyman. I am David Flanders, Chair, and with us is our staff person, Jay Parker. Jay, anyone else in on the meeting that we should acknowledge?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we will go through the approval of the minutes for the May 4th meeting. Does anyone have any comment? If not, I have one. On item F, new business, I would add the words after we discussed the Conservation Commission budget and monies to the Friends of the Saugatucket. I would add the words for water quality monitoring. And I don't know, Jay, you can tell me if this is applicable or not, but item H, where we have update from staff on planning department activities, would it have been appropriate that we announced the town manager resignation? Because it came as a surprise to me, and I don't know if it was here or later in the month, whatever. Do you know when that was made known?
I believe it was later in the month. I don't believe it was at this meeting.
Okay. Okay. Well, then, otherwise, I would hear a motion to approve the minutes as.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Second was by Mary. The motion was made by
Rain.
Jane,
Lorraine.
and the second was done by Mary Talbot Rabiano. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Do we hear aye or nay?
To accept the minutes, I
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passed. Let me get my. Second is the May 10th minutes presented. Do we have any comments or additions or subtractions or corrections for the May 10th, 21 meeting? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the meetings for the May 10th meeting?
I'll approve the minutes. I motion to approve the minutes as presented for May
Mary,
10th.
do I hear a second?
Yep, I'll second that.
Okay, Matt Bradywood seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, the motion is passed to accept the May 10th minutes. Moving on, old business. I do have a report of the motion that we passed to pass our expenditures on to the Watershed Watch through the Friends of the Saugatucket. There was an issue of the mechanics of having to do that, that we couldn't just acquiesce our funds to a different group. So what we had to the Friends of the Saugatucket. So I was in a phone call with both Jay and town manager Robert Zarnetsky. And what had to happen was that there was a legal problem with just passing the funds on to another group. So what Robert came up with, and which was successful, was that we had to get an invoice from Watershed Watch for these funds, the $939, payable to them, because they are the umbrella financial group at this point for Friends of the Saugatucket until the Friends get their own 503-C, if that's the correct terminology, funding. So we did get that invoice from the Watershed Watch, and it did go to the town and payable to the conservation, demanding the funds from the Conservation Commission. The only glitch, and I don't think it was a major one, and Jay, you can confirm this, it listed Jay as the chair of the Conservation Commission. But the invoice did go through to the Conservation Commission. And Jay, do you have any updates on if that was paid yet or what?
I do not. I was sent off to finance for issuance of the payment. I don't know if that's been paid or not.
Okay. Okay. So that's we understood that that was some sort of imperative that it get done before June 1st. And I think it got in before June 1st. And so I'll leave it to the town, on that. New business, discussion on the Conservation Commission activities and initiatives. One thing that I had been thinking is that because I'm on the Red Island Tree Council, where we review funding for various applications for what used to be the America the Beautiful Grant and is now called the Urban and Community Forestry Grant, UCF grant. In the past, South Kingstown has not been eligible because we do not have a comprehensive tree program, which would include budgeting for planting and maintenance of town trees. And those are the trees that are within the town right of way. So what we did in 2014 was essentially a little bit of under the wire, where we did a program which was hugely successful of having applicants for a setback tree program where the trees would be planted on private property within 20 feet of the town right of way, and that they would maintain mulch and water, etc. The trees. And out of the 50 applicants, we had 20 were accepted, and that's all the trees we had. And out of those 20 trees, 17 are living, viable, and looking great. But technically, as I said, that was under the wire. We cannot apply for any of these grants because we do not have, South Kingstown does not have a comprehensive tree program that would involve planting, pruning, maintenance, etc. When we first had our community tree citizens group, in 1995, there was no, actually, there was a budget for planting and pruning, and it was $15,000 each. As time went on and our elder trees started to decay, we had to borrow money from the planting project into the pruning and maintenance. Eventually, that disappeared. And so presumably there is still a line budget item somewhere, if either in Department of Public Services or in the town budget itself, a line item for $15,000 to $30,000 for tree maintenance. And so I asked Jay, and at the last minute, by the way, and I don't expect to get a comprehensive answer because it was too short a time. But I would like, as an initiative of the Conservation Commission Tree Board, to reestablish at least a budget and then apply it for tree maintenance, particularly tree planting. At one point, and our tree warden, Bill Wallace, can quote this, we had a policy of no net loss of trees in South Kingstown. Well, I checked out our tree ordinance and anything else. I found nothing that actually put that wording into, verbiage, town law code. So that doesn't actually exist, even though it was an agreement, a pinky agreement between the town council and everyone else. So I would like us, as one idea of what we could apply ourselves to over the next fiscal year is to, establish what we want to do here with our town trees. Our town trees are aging and they're falling apart. And they're not getting pruned. We're instead having limbs falling down on our town roads. Robinson Street is a good example. There are many good examples. When I was on Lake Street doing a separate individual tree planting program, a woman came out to me and said, "Hey, when we moved here, this was a canopied street." And I said, well, that's, a good idea to pursue. So I would like to see some, baby steps to initiating some kind of policy that we should initiate as the town tree board to recanopying our streets in town. So that's my thought. That's all.
David, this is Jay. If I may, I do have an answer for you in regards to your question with the tree planting budget.
Gotcha.
John Shock responded to me. Actually, I talked to him on the phone, and then he followed up with an email. They have $3,500 budgeted in this fiscal year for agricultural supplies in the town warden's budget, which is essentially for new tree plantings. Currently, they're hoping to use these funds to replace the 3 to 4 dead trees on Main Street and in Peacedale. But that is the extent of the budget for trees with DPW.
Thank you for doing the research. Appreciate it. I would also mention at this point, because we're talking about replacement of trees on Main Street, and I don't know about those on in Peacedale, but oh gosh, it must have been 20 years ago, our Citizens Tree Group went to mulch and remulch the trees planted in the sidewalks on Main Street. And we found that there was no organic soil in those tree pits. We found that it was like cinder, like you'd find on a railroad bed. So if the are to be replanted, it has to be stipulated that the pits be redug and replaced with organic material so that these trees will actually survive. And Bill Wallace mentioned this to me, and he said, what would you suggest as species? And I'm thinking anything that's columnar, like columnar maples or whatever. But the project has to be rethought, and $3,500 is going to do like 2 of these trees. That is an insufficient amount.
David, I should read the rest of the email. I stopped short because I'm probably going to need some help pronouncing this. But the trees they're looking to go with are Musashino Valkova, which are the same trees that DOT replanted on Tower Hill Road. These trees are supposed to be salt tolerant and grow in a more of a columnar configuration so as not to impact vehicle traffic.
Yep.
Mr. Schock spoke with Bill Wallace this afternoon, and he's in agreement with the species and will be trying to get some prices so they can get them secured. The Highway Division will be doing the planting using a mini excavator, and it would be appreciated if the tree board members would provide guidance at the time of planting and perhaps oversight. Once planted, the Highway Division will need to water them on a regular basis. And that's the end of the email.
Thank you. And certainly the second most important thing, by the way, the species are perfect for street trees because there is a limited amount of space. And I also appreciate that they're thinking about replacing the planting medium in that space. And I think those trees.
You know what the common name is for that?
No, I don't.
I don't either. I was curious.
Isn't Zelkova a type of elm?
It is. It's a Chinese elm, and they come in various species, various configurations rather. Some of them spread out a lot with so many variant branches that they need to be pruned. But the ones that have been planted in the medium on Old Tower Hill Road, I think that's a good choice. But I have to reiterate that watering is everything. And if the town is not going to back that up with watering, it's a futile effort. So I appreciate the thought, and let's follow up on that. That's a great idea.
The trees that you're talking about that are going to be planted, where are they going to be planted on? What area are we talking about on Main Street?
In the existing, I believe, and Jay can check this out. I believe they're going to be in the existing sites where the trees are not doing well. In the existing tree planting sites that are not filled with organic material. They're right along Main Street.
Okay.
They're dug out of the sidewalk. One idea that we had posed at the time was that the tree sites be pushed out from the sidewalk into the roadway to provide a slowing down mechanism, but also delineate parking spaces and not impede pedestrian traffic along the sidewalk. But apparently that's not being considered here. So we're talking about replacing species that, particularly if you think about it, in front of the Chevrolet dealership where they've just, died from lack of care and lack of watering. That I think those are the sites we're talking about.
Okay.
I have a comment on this too. For the buyer retention mix, they should be looking at the Rhode Island DOT Stormwater Manual, which is more recent update than the DEM manual. And also check with the Providence Stormwater Innovation Center, which I believe is recommending 6 feet in width for tree planting. I could look up the recommendations of the Providence Stormwater Innovation Center. And, maybe the DOT manual also.
Lorraine, I would like to see an 8x8 or a 6x8, which would necessitate it being pushed out into the
I
current
agree. Right. The 6 would be the absolute minimum.
or is just not workable.
I mean, the tree is just going to die if there's not enough space for the roots to grow.
It is.
Plus, they could connect them underneath. If they had a series of plantings, the whole area could be dug out so the roots can spread below.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what we had
Material.
proposed 10 years ago for the possible Old Tower Hill Road plantings, that we had this median strip like they do in Boston. And they had we had them connected and fed by stormwater runoff. That would have been an ideal thing. But
So
you're right.
this is in the Saugatucket, which is impaired, right? So if the town is doing this, they can claim it towards activity to restore the Saugatucket, which would help for their stormwater permit.
This is good. Well,
And
this needs,
sometimes there are grants that fund these kinds of construction projects. The town should be on the lookout for these things.
I agree. Well, I know that our now leaving town manager was in support of some of these things, but the incoming town manager, we need to talk with him about these issues. This has to be more present.
Do we know who the incoming town manager is going to be?
I think they're only interviewing at this point. We have a temporary one, and she is very receptive to all sorts of wonderful ideas. She was the former, or probably still, head of Parks and Recreation, I think. She's a very receptive woman. She may be able to get these ideas flowing in the right direction. Jay, you know her name. What's her name?
Sorry, who was that?
The current acting town.
Terry Murphy.
Terry Murphy.
Yep. She's very receptive to all sorts of good ideas. So maybe we should, either write a letter to her. Do we have any idea, Jay, as to what the process is, or how far along we are in the process of getting a new town manager? Are we interviewing?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. Does the commission want to posit ideas for a possible letter to Terry Murphy, acting town manager, for where we might want to go for these town tree plantings?
David, I'm going to suggest that the board hold off on taking any action. Right now, the agenda item is just ideas for initiatives.
Right.
My advice would be to stick to just brainstorming for ideas that the commission can either take up at a later time, possibly the next meeting, or, just stay within the bounds of the agenda item that's listed.
Okay. Well, I would like to suggest that we take up tree planting ideas, town tree planting ideas, town street tree planting ideas with the acting town manager for next month's meeting. Do we need a motion for that? Or
No, I mean, you can set the agenda as the chair, so you can advise everyone that if it's okay with everyone else, you'll add that as a discussion item for next month.
Okay. Is everyone comfortable with discussing this next month, with the possibility of drafting a letter as to what we feel is important regarding tree plantings for next month? Does anybody have?
Definitely.
Does anyone have any objection to that? Okay, well, Jay, let's go ahead and put that on the agenda for next month's meeting.
Will do.
Okay, does anybody, we were given this agenda for brainstorming. Does anybody have any ideas of other initiatives that the Conservation Commission should take on that we could talk about and get, use our funding for next year? We had the funding issue come up at the last minute for this fiscal year. And I think we made a good choice. But I do want us to be thinking about, how we want to spend our money over the next year. So let me hear from everybody else.
How much do we get? But I'm sorry, Lorraine. I was
No, go
just,
ahead. Go ahead.
what just annually is our amount, allotted amount?
Well, I can tell you it's changed in that it used to be, I was thinking we were going to be looking at $850, and it turned out to be $939. So I don't know where that money comes from. And it used to be, by the way, it used to be as much as $2,500. And what was done historically was that the town council relegated where those monies were spent. And they had X $100 going to this water testing program, X $100 to Save the Bay, X $100 to various other state boards and commissions and local entities as well. And it was only, and I'm going to be inaccurate here, it's only a few years ago that our current or semi-current commission said we want control over where we're going to spend the money, because it was pointed out, I remember Lorraine pointed out one program that was did not need our money at all. It was totally obsolete. And so we found other ones that were just not in our need, in their need. So we then took control over it, and we ended up spending our money on a couple of great programs by Save the Bay, where they were doing an initiative to elementary schools, I believe it was 4th grade, where they came in and talked about stormwater runoff. And they had models that they brought, and it engaged the kids. It was great, and it was money well spent. And we had done also tree plantings. We'd done tree plantings at the animal shelter at Tuckertown Park. So we had discretion over our money. And so, but the amount has varied, and I have no idea how or why it varied. So I was surprised to hear we had as much as $939. Really? I was expecting $850. So I would like, maybe as another part of our initiative for next year, is to get a solid figure that's guaranteed for the next X number of years, with possible cost of living increase built in. I mean, I argue that we've been fighting for the last 10 years to get a certain minimum wage. And by the time it's passed, well, great. Now we have to go for another 5 years, dollars. So I would like to make that an initiative that we explore to get the Conservation Commission a solid budget that we can use our discretionary funds. And so let's talk about that next month.
Well, what about, I think that's a good idea. I'd like to discuss that. And then that way, if we also have an idea about how much various items would cost,
Yep.
Then we could propose the budget based on how we're going to spend it. So one item I had is the grants from the where the funding for municipal trees. Where does that come from? Is it DEM or some other group?
I can tell you that the only trees that have been planted on town right of way have come from what's actually previously been called America the Beautiful grants. And that is, by the way, how we funded that successful 2014 setback plan on private.
Right.
It's now called the Urban and Community Forestry Grant, the UCF grant. But I don't know how we managed to do that in 2014 because the town of South Kingstown does not meet the requirement for even applying for those grants.
Right, because we need a plan.
Comprehensive tree.
So what if we hired a consultant with Conservation Commission money to write a very simple plan?
Because that consultant will have to come up against a certain head of a certain department in town who's going to reject that.
Well, I mean, it could be something that we discuss with the department heads and reach a general agreement. One of the issues is if the trees must only be street trees, then the program of planting on private property probably wouldn't be covered by those grants.
Right, correct.
Okay,
The
so
only
that's-
reason we moved the idea of planting onto private property was because the town administration has an official policy, by the way, of not planting any more street trees.
Mm.
Okay, that was an agreement between the town manager 2 managers ago and the director of public services. That's an official town policy. No planting of town trees, except in parks and stuff.
So the ones you're talking about for Main Street are not going to be in the right of way? They seems like they would be.
That was done by the DEM. Those ones on Tower Hill, Old Tower Hill Road. That's DEM.
Right,
That
but
was
the new
DOT.
ones we're talking about, DOT did those as part of their renovation, but the new ones we're talking about further down by the river, those would be in the right there because they're replacements. It's okay.
You know, I don't know, because when that is, by the way, a state road. Main Street is that we conceive of Main Street is a state road.
Right.
So when the state DOT redid that road and put in those plantings, I don't know how officially the maintenance of those trees was passed off to the town. I don't know. And the town of South Kingstown will say, hey, we didn't plant them. So nobody watered them. That was a volunteer effort done by Mr. Bell of the Bell Block, by the way, a wonderful guy. And he took out his hose and he just watered those trees. But they wouldn't even be alive today if it were not for a volunteer effort. But they weren't even planted in organic material. It was cinders, like as a railroad bed. So I don't know. Well, you know, I think we need to have a consensus for, you know, making a directive and forming the directive to whom. Is it the town? Is it the state? It is a state road. And yet I think the town accepted the trees. So I do not know the answers to that. So if whoever they is are planning on replacing those trees, we have to be very clear as to who's going to be responsible for their maintenance and for establishing the organic material in which they're embedded, because it's not acceptable. For instance, that new bank, the Bank of Rhode Island, that went in on the I guess would be the east side of Main Street. They put in 6 trees and they all died. And I took photos of them, and I was still looking at the shards of the metal baskets above the soil line. I mean, it was just, and they went through 3 plantings, and our staff person at the time, principal planter, Dennis Vinatero, called them on it and called them on it 3 times. And finally, everybody gave up and they're all dead, you know? So how do we administrate what is good, and who is going to, I mean, they took it on as a private entity, but if we talk about those trees, we have to firmly establish which entity, state, town, is going to be dealing with that. And is it going to be the watering that's required to do that?
So what you're talking about is an enforcement issue. And I think that's a problem with almost any subdivision. And so
True.
maybe that is another thing for brainstorming for next time. How do we be sure that the draft plans, all those recommendations translate into the final plans and the actual construction? Because often there doesn't seem to be any relationship between the proposal and the final product, and no enforcement when the plants die.
That is the good starting point, correct. After that, you have to get into administration and which entity is responsible for it. And so yes, step 1, step 2. Yep. Yeah, I've been butting heads with our town for 25 years,
Yeah,
and
I
I
know.
really don't want to continue. I mean, if the administrators of the various departments don't want to engage, they're going to shut us. They're shut down, and it's just so frustrating. I've had my say for 25 years. I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do.
In terms of enforcing the rules when there's new development, you know, if the plantings die on the books, they're supposed to be replaced. So maybe the first board to speak with is the planning board, because they're the ones that make those decisions and require those stipulations, and they should be concerned with enforcement also.
I have gone out to these developments and I have photo documented that they were planted too deep. And I've taken them back to the town and nothing has happened. And the trees have died, and I've shown the dieback, photo documented, and sometimes they get replaced. But we can't go through these cycles of, because they're only guaranteed for a year, that every year we replace them with new trees that do not get watered or they're planted incorrectly. It's a stupid cycle. There has to be, you know, the tree warden ideally would be the person overseeing all of this. I greatly respect Bill Wallace, but he, at his age, is not going to take on this progressive role. But we do need someone besides me, apparently, who has some authority. I don't have authority. Somebody who has authority in the town to oversee this and make it happen. And you know, the town, by the way, has put out a call, an employment notice for an arborist to be out there who's going to be doing the required pruning and maintenance of our trees and such. They haven't had any bites. So maybe they're not offering enough financial incentive. But Rob Zarnetsky told me months ago that he had an offer out, public notice, for an arborist for a year, and no one has bitten. So there's a problem here, and I don't know the roots of it. I mean, I don't know what to do, you know. So on that optimistic note, does anyone else have ideas on what the Conservation Commission should be working on for the next year?
Chris, should we be doing anything about plastic bags? Making sure those are not being used anymore? Talking about enforcement?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we know that the town sent new notices out according to the manager, and I know Jay
Yep.
passed along the correspondence. But you know, I haven't been back. The issue I had was with one of the larger shopping venues that seemed to be passing them out. You know, there was no plastic bag ban. They were just giving them out wholesale. So I don't know where those things stand. I don't know if there's been any follow-up. I don't know if there were any other. I think the gist I got from the manager was that there were perhaps multiple locations having issues. But I don't know how we enforce that on our end,
Right. Probably not.
other than calling people out. Not calling people out, but calling businesses out.
Right.
And that enforcement is done through the town manager's office.
Right, through the ordinance, right?
Correct. Town code, town ordinance.
So to the extent that we're aware of non-compliance, it would be, you know, we could all, you know, report it to the town manager office, who's in charge of making sure that there's compliance. With the state of things, it may not get a high priority.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to add for ideas that we should be talking about next month for, you know, what we might be thinking of for the next year? And that would include how we might want to be spending our budget. And to that point, Jay, I would say, do you have any idea, or can you tell us next month of what that amount might be?
Actually, I was just looking it up. I couldn't find it.
And why does it vary?
I don't know. I'm going to show you. Give me 1 second. Let me zoom this in a little bit.
David, I have a question for you, since while Jay looks that up.
Yep.
Your point regarding the town having a comprehensive tree program.
Yep.
The organization that requires it, you may want to check to see if they have some form of, if they require it, whether they have some form of a model.
Yeah.
Or not ordinance, but a model program requirements, you know, what would go into something like that.
I will be doing that because I was reminded of this whole idea because the grants committee is going to be meeting in the next month. And I did want to know what the requirements were. So I will be finding, I will give you all a report next month. I just didn't do the homework today. So yeah, that's a good point.
You think it has, do you, from what you know, and maybe you don't know, but do you think it's something that arises to the level of an ordinance, or if it's something less than that, a policy?
No. It's a number of components. One is to have a tree ordinance. The second is to have a budget. And there's no, I don't believe there's any monetary minimum, but there has to be a budget for tree planting and tree maintenance. And there has to be established tree board, which we are. And so we meet, you know, 2 out of those 3 requirements so far. So I'll get back to us, you know, next month but that is the basic stuff that I know. And so far, I don't know, and Jay's going to help me find out if we have a linear, delineated budget item for tree planting and for tree maintenance. And if we do have one for tree planting, I want to go back X number of months and see, okay, what trees did we plant? And I don't mean necessarily in parks, but I want on town right of ways and what species they were and when they were planted, because I want to do follow-up. I do that voluntarily. I go look at them and say, okay, well, this is planted too deep, or this one is dying, or that. I'm willing to do that voluntarily. But what the town should be doing, I'm willing to do that. But I want that data. And I think that the grants committee is going to need that data. So I will get back to you with specifics, next month, because I will be asking those questions. And I'll be meeting with the DEM urban forestry manager. So for the grants, committee meeting. So I'll find that out and I'll get back to us. Good
David,
question.
so to go back to your budget question,
Yep.
I went ahead and pulled up the last, the past budgets.
Yep.
And can you see that?
Oh, it's on my phone, Jay. It's much too small.
All right. So for those of you that can see it or can't see it, I'll try to blow this up a little more.
Mhm.
This is 2012, 2013 fiscal year. You see 850 across the board
Mhm.
for those years, going back actually 2010, 2011,
Okay, yep.
2012. We go forward to FY 2015. It remained the same and at 850. With
Yep.
no increase. And
Well,
this year,
that's why I was surprised to see 939 for this year, because the
Yep.
850 sounded familiar.
right. So then you see in FY 19, you're actually negative by 209. Not sure. Again, I don't know how that happened. I don't have any of the background information.
Yep.
The FY 2020, 2021 was 650. The projected was 939.
Okay. Okay.
But it's a baseline 650. So somewhere along the lines, well, 6 years ago or so, or 5 years ago or so, it was cut by $200. But that's what went into the manager's budget the
Yep.
budget historically.
Well, Jay,
I
maybe
have a feeling that 939 somehow
Yep.
or other had some carryover in it or something. Generally, that doesn't happen, but neither does an arbitrary increase to a line item in the proposed budget.
When we were talking with Jamie Rabbit about this issue, he said, if you can't spend that money, we can carry it over. Now, I don't know if he was just acting in his capacity or if he could actually make that legislatively happen, but he alluded that we could have carryover.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. The way that I've, in my 14 years of municipal government, if you don't use it, it gets absorbed back into the general fund.
Right. Okay. Yep. Okay, Chris, you had something else?
No, that was it, David. No, thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question about right of way. Is there a standard distance of town right of way?
No.
Or is it different for
There
every
is-
road?
And it's the funny thing, when you go down to the town engineer's office, because we wanted to plant a tree for Leona Helmsley in the town right of way. And so on Rodman Road. And so I went down to the engineer's office and he drove me out in his pickup truck with his maps. And the way that town right of ways are drawn, they're angular drawings. because the road is very curvy, but the right of way is angular. And don't ask me why. And you'd think that, okay, it's X number of feet from the center line of the road. It's not. However, those engineering drawings are written, the angular ones, and to the actual road is how it's determined. So you could have a right of way off of the asphalt that is 6 feet, or it could be 12 feet. So it changes, and you have to really verify with the town engineer's office what the right of way is at that particular, point.
And this is not a problem this is not I wouldn't really call it an issue. This is not a topic or a concept that is foreign to any municipality. Right of ways, I mean, we live in a environment that was built out long ago. These roads were in existence a long time ago.
Right.
Property lines were established a long time ago.
Right.
There are various size rights of way in width. However, the roads are never centered, or aside from brand new developments or brand new streets, even then they're not centered, dead center in the middle of the right of way necessarily.
Right.
You just don't get it. You have a standard width roadway surface and then an existing right of way distance, right of way width. So there is no set calculation or any way that you can figure out. It's not standard on any property or any roadway at all.
Right.
And I just was, I was just imagining how nice it would be if we could have some sort of document or list where we could know all the trees that are in the town right of way. I understand that that's near an impossibility. I just was, the first step towards that was wondering if there was a standard right of way that someone could walk down a street and just maybe very slowly over time, sort of just walk down a street and in some standard way be able to identify which trees were on town property and which weren't. But it sounds like that's a much taller order.
But actually,
I wouldn't.
I was given some guidelines by that town engineer. He says you can look at those stone walls, and you can look at telephone poles. Telephone poles are never on private property. They are on town right of way. And you say, wow, that telephone pole is really close to the road. Isn't that a danger? He said, well, no, because that's all the room they had to plant it. Telephone poles, you can also look for those granite, you can't find them a lot, but the granite postings that delineate a property line. But the stone walls and the telephone poles give you a really good idea of what is the town right of way. And aside from that, if you really had a question where you wanted to plant a tree or do something, is this in the town right of way or not? Just go down to the town engineer's office, Department of Public Services, and they'll come out and they'll easily tell you. I mean, or actually, I had the question for right of way for the town engineer, Rich Boulianes, and he sent me this fantastic email with GPS and colored lines of the town right of way. I mean, you can do this online, and it's fantastic. So it's easy to determine these days, much more than it was, 10 years ago.
I just would add that stone walls are frequently a great indicator of property boundaries, but not all the time. So where you see a stone wall, all those things give you a good idea of a point of reference possibly, but it's not by any means, it's not a way to confirm it with any sense of confidence. But to what Matthew was saying, it is a tall order, but it's not necessarily past the town's ability to do so. So right now, I know that the town is looking at new software for their asset management, where they can inventory and manage, say, catch basins, outfalls, things of that nature. Street trees could be considered an asset, and they could be GPS and put into this software, this program. Now, when you think about it, an asset along the lines of highway, you have street signs, you have all kinds of assets that need to get identified and located. It really depends on where that fall, where the street trees fall on the list of priority, or whether or not they send crews out to GPS every asset on a certain section of street, and they get the trees at the same time that they get to the manholes and the catch basins and all that stuff as far as GPS locations. It's a tall order. Perhaps there is an interest in DPS knowing that, because it may help in some of the reporting requirements. Also may help in identifying liabilities and determining, where work gets performed and how that dovetails with management of their activities at DPS, what they've maintained, what they've done. So it is a tall order, but I don't know if it's something that is impossible. I think it is possible. It's just to the extent of what DPS wants to use that software for.
It would be a great project for an intern, summer intern.
Well, I have to say that in the late 1990s, after we participated in a group with UMass Amherst in doing a citizens tree inventory sample, that it was a year after that, it was still the late 1990s, that the town did a street tree inventory. And that data is somewhere recorded in GPS. Every tree. And we were told at that time, and I looked today to see if that was ever put in writing anywhere, and it's not. But we were told, and Bill Wallace, our tree warden, mentioned it last month, that town policy is that there is no net loss of trees or trees that are taken down. And that was when he was at our meeting for the Torrey Road, 6 trees to be taken down. And he was correct. And I tried to find some language to back that up anywhere in our town ordinances and couldn't find it. So, but that was the town policy at the time, and it was a very positive policy, but it certainly has not been followed through. In fact, between the former town manager and the current director of public services, the policy has been no new street tree plantings. So that's what we're up against.
Well, it sounds like we have enough to discuss at the next meeting then.
Yeah, we do. Also, Jay, you've got these items for the agenda for next meeting. Also, our July meeting is our annual elections. That should go on the agenda as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
can you just clarify exactly what you expect those agenda items to be? I have town street tree planting ideas.
Yep.
On there.
Yep.
And was the street tree inventory, did that manifest into an agenda item? And to what extent do you want to describe that discussion?
No, unless we want to discuss if that data of street trees, of town street trees, has been updated, and to what extent. Yeah,
I will check with Carol Baker to see if she was around, or if she has that data in a GIS format.
She'd be the person to talk to. Yeah, let's do that and see if we can, mention that. Because, as I said, I can't confirm legally what the town council agreed upon at that time, that there be no net loss of trees. And I can't even tell you the date. It was late 1990s, early 2000s. And I could find no verification of that. So
that's the type of thing that should be in the comp plan.
Oh,
Maybe it's in there.
Well, that's a good point. I did not check that. I will. And if you could give
And
that
if it
a,
hasn't been adopted yet, it could be modified.
It's been adopted.
It's been adopted, okay,
It was
fine,
adopted last
just recently.
meeting of the council.
Right,
okay, I will check that to see if I can find any historical reference to that. It was a common thing. It might have been just something that was mentioned to placate our citizens tree group, Act for SK. But I will look to see if I can find anything on that. So, does anybody else have any ideas on what the Concom might want to take up in the next 12 months? Okay. I think I'm at the end of my agenda. Our next meeting is going to be,
David, if you could, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just, so do we just have those two items, the town street tree planting ideas and the election of officers? And then whatever information I can find in regard to the inventory from Carol. And I'll also look to see about the replacement policy, if I can find anything on that.
Mhm.
But any other items that I missed?
Lorraine, have I missed anything?
no, I think that's it.
Yep.
think the various things all rolled under tree activities.
Okay.
tree cleanup.
As far as formal agenda items, Jay, I think that's it. I would have a letter, letter number F or something for additional business, just for us to have a free-flowing discussion of anything we might have missed tonight. Is that possible? Or is that not formal?
Well, what about other new ideas for the work, If the current agenda is to discuss the street tree concept and town trees, also we'd be open to we could discuss any new ideas that come up at the next meeting.
Also, I would add that a formal idea would be continuing discussion of what we would do for next year's fiscal budget. And what is the amount, and how can we affect an increase in that amount, and what we would like to do with that amount. So let's put Conservation Commission budget as a formal agenda item.
Mhm.
Jay.
Okay. I do want to, agenda items are meant to be specific when it comes to decisions of the board. The agenda item should be as detailed as possible to give the reader an idea of what's being discussed and what possibly could be voted on.
Yep.
You do have item I, which is a standing item on your agenda. That's next meeting date and agenda items.
Correct.
So if an idea comes up that's mid-meeting, let's say, somebody wants to make a motion to add discussion of something to the agenda at that time, you could do so under that I, with the idea that it may possibly become a future agenda item.
Right.
You can amend the agenda on the fly for discussion purposes, but I would refrain from putting a
Voting.
general, I would refrain from putting a general heading to something that you guys might intend to take action on.
Correct. No action. This is
Correct.
further discussion. We can always take action the following month.
Right. I would advise you that if something comes up that you would take a poll of the board, get a motion to add it to the agenda for discussion at the time, at the meeting.
Yeah. Yep.
If you don't anticipate it ahead of time.
Yeah. If it's not imperative, yeah, right. Definitely. Okay, our next meeting date, if I'm looking at my calendar correctly,
Should be July 6th.
July 6th, Tuesday, July 6th at 6:00 p.m. Okay, we have to designate a member for attending the TRC meeting. which is going to be, is it Wednesday the 9th, Jay?
Correct.
And what time? It's all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's at the desire of the duty planning board member
Okay.
who is not we did not get one assigned because we did not have a May regular meeting.
Okay, so it could be 9 o'clock in the morning, or it could be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Does any of our attending members here this evening want to be the representative for the TRC meeting on June 9th? And if nobody else wants to, I'm perfectly willing to. But if somebody else wants to get involved, please be my guest. Okay, Jay, you can put me down.
David, what's the, when you attend these meetings, what's the nature of your involvement?
The nature of it is in whatever I feel I want to get involved in. Generally, it is usually with Conservation Commission related issues, like if you're presenting a landscaping plan, have you used the South Kingstown subdivision cartoons and descriptions of how to plant a tree? But I feel free to talk about density, traffic plans, particularly like on Curtis Corner Road. Anything you are interested in, you can feel free to bring up, because this is where things start before they go to the planning board. And generally, as far as technical review, it is involved in a lot with John Chalk talking about the size of the sewer connection, or somebody talking about how wide is the road, and the Union Fire District rep saying, do you have enough turnaround space in that cul-de-sac? And but you know, I feel free to speak up on any of these things. And generally, mostly I sit there and I bring up the landscaping plan. And I don't talk about specific trees. I talk about density, or how much are you clear cutting, or this species is inappropriate. Yeah, but you can feel free to talk about any of that stuff. And it's interesting. And like I say, it's pre-planning board. It's getting rid of the technical stuff so that when the planning board is looking at a development, they know at least they've met the criteria. Then they can criticize, well, I don't like how you're doing that. I don't like the way this looks. And so that's the planning board. But the technical review committee is making sure that they've got the technical stuff in order. And like I said, that for me, certainly looks at, they have their own tree planting specs. And I say, well, what we're trying to do is standardize everything here, use the town specs. Before you get to the planning board, change your drawing, change your description. So it's, and sometimes they're really within an hour, hour and a half. Other times we've gone for 3 hours where I'm just sitting there because they've granted the Conservation Commission, they've granted us to be there, a seat to be there. So I'm not going to abuse that and say, you know, I really need to get lunch. I really need another cup of coffee. No, I stay there, and sometimes it's a bitch, you know. It's so I would invite you to check it out, you know. Otherwise, I'm willing to do it. It's very bureaucratic. It's very bureaucratic.
David, can I just clarify on that a little bit?
Please.
So the Conservation Commission has a role with the TRC, as you all know. But the intent was that the member that represents the Conservation Commission stays within the realm of what the Conservation Commission is typically charged with doing. That's set in our own town code. That's also outlined, I believe, in the Rhode Island general laws as to what you guys are focused on. Natural resources, conservation, dovetails with, stormwater and density and all that stuff. And David is correct. I would say the primary role of the Conservation Commission member in these is reviewing the overall impacts to natural resources. Are there things that can be tweaked for conservation purposes, limits of clearing, increased buffers, things of that nature that are at the core of what Conservation Commission is charged with doing. As a secondary nature, as a secondary component to that, questions come up with, say, a traffic study or vision clearance at a corner, at an intersection or a roadway, where the town engineer points out, or the town planner points out a concern that they may have, because that's more their forte. We can't expect the Conservation Commission member to be fluent in a traffic study or general transportation rules that DOT may impose. So those questions come up, and a lot of times it's those secondary input from the board members where somebody says, yeah, I agree with John Schock, or I agree with our town engineer. We can't really, as a layperson, I can't really assess if that corner, if this is actually safe, if we don't know if the clearance is appropriate. Like generalities like that. I disagree a little bit with David that you don't go to the extent where you can come out of the box with having let's say a difference of opinion with density or something. As long as it ties back to your role as a Conservation Commission member and what your charge is, it's fair game. Because that's the role that you play when you sit there as a Conservation Commission member. But the rest of it sort of comes in as a secondary level of support to support other concerns that might get brought up that maybe you missed or didn't even think of,
I got you. How many people are in attendance?
I agree with Jay. And I have in the past brought up with these traffic studies and traffic congestion at certain intersections, I've brought up air quality. And I felt that was within the realm of discussion of the Conservation Commission. Because if you have cars idling at these intersections for an increased amount of time over what the current density is, that is an issue. And I've mentioned that.
How many people are usually at those meetings? Or how many departments?
There's the building and zoning official is a member, the Department of Public Services, the town engineer, the planning director, those are the four primary department head or department members that are there. There's a duty member from the planning board that is assigned, much like the duty member for the Conservation Commission that is assigned. And also Chris Heiner from Union Fire District.
And you're there to actually facilitate the Zoom at this point.
Yeah, and I'm there. I mean, I take the applications in, we set them up for the planning board, we do the staff memos, we organize and do the administrative side of things. So I'm as familiar with the applications as the planning director is.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm there as well. As far as other members, the applicants and their project teams will attend, obviously, to discuss the project with the TRC. And on some occasions, not all, we do get members of the public that attend, but TRC meetings are really advisory to the planning board. The discussions are technical in nature. So comments from the public, while we listen to them, there's really not much that we can do to respond because most of them are subjective. Most comments are subjective. At times, it's an opportunity for maybe a local property owner or a neighbor to a development to say, hey, to bring something to the town that maybe the town wasn't aware of, a block storm drain, say, or something like that, where drainage isn't working appropriately, even though they think drainage is there. But for the most part, there's not much for public comment because there's not much from a technical standpoint that the TRC can do with that kind of public comment.
It's not a planning board meeting.
Correct. I frequently will field calls from people that are interested in attending TRC and say, hey, it's a public meeting, you're free to attend. but your comments really should go to the planning board because the TRC is not in a position to really do anything with them. They're merely advisory to the planning board anyway.
Yep.
Jay, what time in advance do they provide the meeting materials for review?
I get the agenda set. I try to get the agenda set a week in advance. Sometimes it's a little later than that. Sometimes it's 5 days, but standard practice, I try to utilize the same schedule that we do for the planning board, and that's a week.
Mhm.
And now the way we've been doing things, as I'm sure you've seen, everything is online. So the agendas
Right.
have all the information attached to them.
Is
But
it
it does-
possible that you can send out, sometimes I'd like to see those things to know whether, just to see what's going on. Like it's difficult for me to commit to attend the meeting a month in advance without seeing what's on the agenda, maybe just a bunch of traffic studies that I don't have any expertise in. But is it possible to send me the, or Matt, for that matter, or anyone else who's interested, to send the agenda just to see if there's if I might have comments and discuss it with David or whoever else is going?
Well, the
Aren't
problem,
Town
the
website.
problem,
Aren't
Go ahead,
the other
David.
website? Jay? Sorry.
Yeah, but I think that the issue is the timing.
Right.
So,
But if you
so,
say about a week in advance, you'd be sending it out.
yeah, so
Yeah,
for
that's
instance,
fine. Yeah, when you normally send it out.
but that's the purpose of having a TRC a Conservation Commission representative lined up. before I
Right, so
send it out.
if David was slated to attend and
Yep.
I had a comment about stormwater on one of the projects, would it be inappropriate if I discussed it with him before the meeting? Or I
No.
could just attend the meeting myself as a citizen.
As a citizen, you could, yeah. There's some issues, there's some timing issues there. And honestly, I've got a pretty long laundry list of
I know
sending
you have a lot on
agenda-
your plate.
Well,
Yeah.
just sending agendas out and to remember to send it to the Conservation Commission in addition to the TRC the duty member of the TRC.
Right,
It's, I can't really accommodate that because I'll
Okay.
forget and then I'll be subject to, hey, I didn't do it.
so David, could you send it to me when you get it?
Yeah, definitely. Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing you could do is you could sign up
Posted, isn't it?
on the website. I forget what it's called, Notify Me.
I think
Now
I
or
did. I
something.
don't get anything from it though.
And if you sign up for the TRC meeting, you'll get a notification when those things get posted, when those
Oh,
items.
all right. That's easy. Then you don't have to do it.
Yeah, but again, there's a timing issue because I generally set the notifications to go out 2 days before the meeting because agendas can be modified up until 48 hours before a meeting.
Yeah, that's
So
not
I
a lot
don't-
of time.
If an agenda gets modified, I don't want to have to keep sending out
Sure.
notifications and people will start saying, why am I getting 17 or 3 notifications for the same meeting?
Sure. Okay.
So Lorraine,
Thank you,
yes,
Jay.
when I get it, I will send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
David, can
And
you tell,
everybody else, by the way, who's interested. Matt, yeah, I can do that to you as well.
Mhm.
or you can just send it to Lorraine and Lorraine can send it to me.
Okay, I'll do that.
And then I'll send
Like
it,
chain mail.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay, at this point, we're near the end of our meeting. I want to ask everyone, do you have anything else that you think might be pertinent to our commission that we need to talk about right now before we adjourn? And hearing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Mary, as a motion to we adjourn, do I hear a second?
yeah, I'll second it.
Matthew has seconded. Any discussion? No. We will adjourn. Thank you all for doing this. I appreciate it. It's
Thank
a little-
you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and thank you,
Good night.
Jay.
Have a good night.
Welcome,
Good
guys.
night.
Have a good one.
Yep.